been balmy mild for late October, with temperatures into the low 20s Celsius across the southeast of England. It's going to be mild into tomorrow as well, maybe not quite as warm as today. We'll have a mixture of sunshine and showers because we've still got low pressure nearby. Quite a few isobars on the chart, so it will be windy, especially around some Irish Sea coast. But our air source coming in from the Azores, which is why it's so mild. Now, through tonight, the rain eventually clears away from northern Scotland. Many places will be dry. Start to see an area of cloud and rain push into East Anglia and the southeast, and some blustery showers will start to feed into Northern Ireland, Wales, southwest England. And look at those overnight temperatures, 10 to 14 degrees. So we're holding on to the mild theme. Now, don't forget the clocks go back 1 hour, early hours of Sunday. And it takes us into Sunday then on a fairly mild note. Some sunshine around, early rain clears from the southeast. There'll be plenty of showers in the north and the west of the country, some of these pushing their way eastwards. And it's going to be mild again tomorrow, but not quite as warm as today.
With midterm elections approaching, the American people prepare to make their voices heard on everything from inflation to crime and relations with Russia and the war in Ukraine. We travel the country, talking to voters about where they stand on the big issues. And we'll break down the impact of the upcoming elections on the US and the rest of the world. Follow the US midterm elections on the BBC News Channel and online.
My writing is my activism.
Painting is a weapon of offense and defense against the enemy.
This in the land of the free.
Works of art by Rembrandt and Renoir have been stolen by armed robbers.
On one level, it's an art show, on another level, it's a freak show.
The fascinating stories behind the art on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Hello, good afternoon. The household energy supplier Octopus is to buy its competitor Bulb, the largest energy company to collapse amid soaring wholesale gas and electricity prices last year. The government has spent billions of pounds keeping Bulb afloat since then. Now, Octopus has agreed a deal to take on the company's 1.5 million customers. Our business reporter Ramzan Kamali has the details.
The energy market was in disarray this time last year. Dozens of firms went bust as energy prices soared. The regulator, Ofgem, increased what was then known as the energy price cap. The biggest victim was Bulb, put in a special administration, kept going by a huge government bailout. Today, Octopus are confident the takeover of Bulb's customers would be a smooth one.
Octopus has got a great track record of bringing large numbers of customers across. So, for example, when Avro failed, it was the largest company to date. We were able to look after those customers and staff pretty seamlessly. And I think with Bulb, the experience we've got means that we're probably the natural choice.
In total, 1.5 million Bulb customers will move across to Octopus. Last November, the government had to bail out the firm with a £1.7 billion loan. But early this year, the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility predicted the total bailout package would be £2.2 billion. This deal could save taxpayers millions.
I think it'd be good. For Octopus to take over Bulb and relieve the taxpayer of the burden of running it for the moment. Also will make Bulb customers obviously give them more comfort that someone is actually running their business and looking after them in the best way possible.
Additionally, Octopus has agreed to share profits, if any are made from its new Bulb customers, with the government for up to 4 years. Octopus will become one of the country's biggest suppliers, and the company were keen to reassure customers.
No one's going to see prices going up as a result of this agreement. People should just sit tight, For now, the service will carry on exactly as it does, provided by the same people.
Since the war in Ukraine, energy bills are much higher, despite the government's energy price guarantee. That's due to end next April. So even though there's been some certainty provided with this deal, for consumers what they pay in the future remains unclear. Ramzan Karmali, BBC News.
Russia says it is suspending its participation in an internationally brokered deal to allow grain exports from Ukraine. The announcement was in response to what the Russian army called a massive Ukrainian drone attack on Russian ships in occupied Crimea. But Ukraine has called that a false pretext for blocking the grain corridor. Let's find out more from James Waterhouse, who's in the city of Dnipro. James, what's the significance then of Russia pulling out of this agreement about the corridor?
Well, it's significant for the millions of people around the world who relied on Ukrainian grain being delivered to them in order for them to eat and not starve. It's significant for Ukraine's damaged economy. This was a fragile arrangement which allowed it to finally export across the mine-infested waters of the Black Sea. And this was a fragile arrangement, but it was the only diplomatic breakthrough we've had in this war, really, aside from the prisoner of war exchanges we've seen. So it is a setback in that sense, but it wasn't working perfectly. Moscow's been accused of causing huge queues, of ships of up to 170 of them. In turn, Moscow said it's not been allowed to export its own products, such as fertilizer, because of sanctions. So it wasn't working perfectly. But look, we find ourselves in a military cycle where in recent months we've seen Crimea targeted, somewhere Russia's tried to portray as a fortress, despite it's still, it being part of Ukraine. When it's been targeted, Russia has responded by launching huge missile attacks across the whole of Ukraine. We could well find ourselves in that cycle. But finally, the grain deal was seen as the basis for a potential ceasefire down the line. What Ukraine will say is that we still have momentum, we are still retaking territory, we don't need a deal to keep doing that.
James, thank you for now. James Waterhouse in Ukraine. 2 people have been killed and more than 50 are being treated for cardiac arrest after reports of a stampede in South Korea's capital, Seoul. It happened as huge crowds gathered for Halloween festivities. Up to 100,000 people are said to have been celebrating in a popular night spot. Emergency medical teams have been sent to the area. Here, the head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into allegations of bullying and sexual harassment against female recruits in the submarine service. Several women who've served in the fleet told the Daily Mail that they faced mistreatment from all ranks. The First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Ben Key, said no form of harassment would be tolerated. There is major disruption to rail services across Scotland because of a 24-hour walkout by ScotRail workers. More than 2,000 members of the RMT union are taking part in the strike. Trains are running on just 3 routes in the Central Belt. All other services are cancelled. The closing stages of campaigning are underway in Israel before polls open for the 5th election there in 4 years. As with those previous elections, the result is expected to be very close. The former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping to return to power. To do so, he's relying on a far-right party which has seen a surge in support. Our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman reports.
Meet the new army of young voters in Israel, putting their faith in ultra-nationalism. And enter from the far right, Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's the follower of a racist movement and wants to expel what he calls disloyal Arabs. Ben-Gvir rouses his supporters over security.
They should not see the light of day. A death sentence for the terrorists.
Ben-Gvir electrifies his fans. They are excited because they feel they're on the verge of getting a lot stronger. A man who many felt could be kept to the fringes of Israeli politics could be about to enter its government.
I love Israel and I love against all the Arabs. Just that's the jihad.
Why do you want to
Just a
expel
minute.
Palestinians?
They want kill me and kill you, the jihadists.
Where tensions flare, Ben Gvir will be there to pour on fuel, say his critics. In occupied East Jerusalem, he pulled out his gun, calling for Palestinians who throw stones to be shot. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, or Bibi, rallies his own base. He's nurtured the extreme right, hoping to boost coalition numbers for a return to power.
You have forces like Itamar Ben-Gvir and his partner Bezalel Smotrich, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who want to change the type of democracy that we have in the state of Israel, want to take us potentially into a dark moment.
The current coalition's election ads warn that Netanyahu needs the far right's backing as he tries to swerve corruption charges, which he denies. The incumbents say they're tough on security amid spiralling violence this year. In the occupied West Bank, the army is still blocking roads from Nablus over Palestinian gun attacks. It is a slow road, and Palestinians call this collective punishment. Their opponents call them pyromaniacs as they portray themselves as patriots. Israel's race to break its election deadlock sees a battle over how far the far right will reach. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Now, in sport, Wales are out of the Women's Rugby Union World Cup at the quarter-final stage after being thrashed 55 points to 3 by the hosts and reigning champions New Zealand. England will play Australia for a place in the semi-finals overnight. Joe Curry has been watching.
The other side of the world up against the defending champions in their backyard for a place in the semi-finals. Wales women would need all the support they could get. After pleasantries were exchanged, Wales found themselves with an early chance, which they wasted. Opportunities like that wouldn't come around very often as the Black Ferns started to find their feet.
One chance, one try.
As time and time again, they found themselves in at the corner as they built up a commanding lead. There was a change of ends, but no change of tactic from the world champions. That's Portia Woodman's 20th World Cup try, a new record for the tournament.
Absolutely sumptuous.
Under the lights, the Black Ferns looked very much at home in a performance that was hard to fault, whilst Wales found themselves out-muscled and outmanoeuvred as New Zealand put on a show worthy of the packed-out crowd. They'll now move on to the final four, where they'll face France. For Wales, there's now a long flight home.
No regrets, before coming out I asked the girls, to give it a all, show some colour and some heart, and we definitely showed it.
This result will hurt, but for many it'll be seen as the beginning of the journey for Wales women after the Welsh Rugby Union only offered them full-time contracts just a few months ago. What this result will do, though, is show them how much further they still need to go if they're to close the gap on the best in the world. Joe Curry, BBC News, Whangarei.
Well, there is more on all today's stories throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. I'll be back with the late news here at 10:10. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news wherever you are. Have a good evening. See you later. Bye-bye.